Hi everyone, this is the fourth video of our first unit, and this is privacy issues in US history. So keep in mind, we've already done terror events that happened before 9/11, the 93 center bombing, the 98 embassy bombings, and then we talked to a reaction being the Patriot Act. So now, thinking of the Patriot Act, go back in time again to think of issues that related to that before history. So besides covering the Patriot Act, we also discussed the Ben Franklin quote. So we know that some of these ideas have been a thread all throughout our history. So this is not the first time in the United States that there was a debate over balancing security with people's rights, right? Not at all. There were precedents set before the Patriot Act. And as a little side note, all of them were controversial. None of them had unlimited support by the public or the government. All had some support because they saw the threat of an enemy as being something they had to take action on. So before the Patriot Act, there were exceptions under federal law for things like wiretaps and searches, if there are probable cause with certain things. But under 1978, Congress created the Federal Intelligence Surveillance Act Court, and that discovered that intelligence-related agencies had in the past spied on hundreds of thousands of Americans, most famous being Martin Luther King Jr. So, when do certain acts become abused, and when are people's rights violated? That's something we always sort of come to reflect on and debate about. So an example is the Espionage Act of 1917. This was created right after the United States joined World War I. Just like the Patriot Act, it was amended many times. And similar, again, it was to prevent support of wartime enemies. It prohibited interference with military operations or recruitments. It prevented insubordination in the military and basically spying. There was a court case that said this did not violate the freedom of speech, and it's really been contested ever since. Now, what was meant to be amendments to that act, which really became an act of itself and even more controversial, was the Sedition Act of 1918. So this extended the Espionage Act, and it included making it illegal to give speech or language that was offensive to the United States, or anything that was offensive to the flag, our military, or anything like that. And if you violated it, you could be imprisoned for 20 years. The language said you couldn't say anything that was disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language against the US, the military, the flag. Recent court cases in the past few decades suggest that it's unlikely that similar language would ever be upheld as constitutional again, but it was around for a little while. Then we have the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, so go back even further in history. So the Alien Act in 1798 was passed by the Federalist Congress. It was actually led by Alexander Hamilton, at that time, many Hamilton fans in here. However, they sort of passed and drafted this without really even talking to the president, who was Adams at the time. So we already talked about Adams being the first ambassador of the United States in the Netherlands, but by now he's president, and he did sign it into law. The Alien Act really targeted immigrants. So look at how immigrants have been targeted in a post 9/11 society related to terror and things like that. The Alien Act gave new powers to the government to deport foreigners, and also made it difficult for new immigrants to vote. They had to live in the country for so long. Then we have the Sedition Acts, and that prohibited public opposition to the government, right? Once again, you couldn't write or say things against the government. And this image here shows how it was contested in Congress at the time, right? It was controversial. You see them getting all rowdy. Right? Many of our founding fathers did oppose it, including famous ones like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And together, those two wrote the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions condemning the Alien and Sedition Acts. Jefferson wrote that these acts effectively undermine the Constitution. George Washington also spoke to people like Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry, that he was appalled by it. So the Sedition Acts did convict 14 politicians, Republicans. The Republican Party is not really the same as now, but they were called Republicans then. Mostly were journalists, but they were prosecuted, and some of them were even imprisoned. So some of the connections we're making here, right? All throughout history, you see examples where safety was an issue, especially if we had an enemy, where security was an issue. Where there also was an issue was, did it violate rights and did it matter? Also, how did they change over time? Did they get more severe, less severe? Do they make people more secure, less secure? What about privacy? Has people's attitudes changed over time? And I just wanted to conclude by showing you guys two quick political cartoons that relate to the Patriot Act. There's hundreds of them. Most of the cartoons are biased against the Patriot Act. But you'll see here, think of the examples we've done, symbolism, all that sort of stuff. We can talk about what you think this means. Maybe I'll ask you a question here on it. Also, this cartoon really sort of shows what we were talking about today, the past. And, well, 2005, 2006 was still the past, but you understand. So Patrick Henry, like we mentioned, give me liberty or give me death, meaning those freedoms are what's most important. Then maybe security is more important. And we'll continue to talk about this and debate about it. Remember, there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just important that we observe and analyze it. Okay? Don't forget to submit the form when you're done. If you have any questions, let me know. Not a bad idea to reflect in your standard sheet as well. Before you finish this. Okay? See you guys next class.